Ian Shiskin, Cherdian Sokolov, Cromwell Stingwood, Dmitry Kashin, and Marta Farharich were archmages who left significant marks in the history of magic. Apprentices have studied the doctrines established by these individuals, and even those not on the path of magic have learned about their history and achievements. For centuries, their existence elevated the stature of the empire. They were called the heroes of the empire. Yet, in a dark corner of the Royal Library at Renelmus Academy, thoughts disparaging and mocking the idea of modeling oneself after these imperial heroes resonated. It was not unusual for such thoughts to stem from envy and jealousy among the untalented. However, what was peculiar here is that these thoughts did not emanate from a person, but from a dark corner on a bookshelf. A talking grimoire, known as grimoire, contained vast magical knowledge. Simply opening the book and reading from it would endow one with magical knowledge sufficient to become a mage. The historically proud grimoire had trained countless disciples to become special mages. Ironically, this was the story from 300 years ago. Now, grimoire lay neglected on a shelf, screaming and desperately begging for someone to notice it. The book knew its efforts were futile, as only those who had signed a pact or had direct contact could hear it speak. Suddenly, a young man named Chaina Yunsbelia, of knightly descent, picked grimoire off the shelf. Grimoire sensed that Chaina possessed no magical potential, yet driven by a desire to train the strongest mage, it vigorously persuaded him to agree to open it. Upon opening grimoire, a bright light appeared, and a contract symbol emerged on Chaina's hand, binding the owner until death. Thus, grimoire's journey to nurture a mage officially began. It seemed that grimoire would escape its imprisonment. But no, Chaina stepped back, lacking the desire to become a mage. A fierce argument ensued, and grimoire's deadly curses became reality. Poor was the fate of the young man, perhaps an omen, marking the end for grimoire, destined to remain a useless book for another 300 years. As the clock neared 12, a new cycle was about to begin, and grimoire did not know where it would be transported next. Perhaps to a grand palace library, a foul-smelling slum underground, or a decrepit shelf in some market. What would become of its life then? Suddenly, grimoire heard footsteps and the sound of a lock being picked. It could be a thief, searching for something among the books. The book heard him looking for it, not wanting to be relocated, and thus made a noise. The thief hastily opened the book, and a contract was immediately engraved on the palm of his hand. It had been 300 years since grimoire had fallen into the Royal Academy, and for the first time in a cycle, there were two contract holders. The thief entered the library undetected by the magical surveillance devices and avoided the guard team outside. It turned out the thief was female. Her name was Riley, just an ordinary girl who had heard about an incident in the library while wandering and decided to check it out. Grimoire silently wondered if she was born with magical connections like dragons and spirits, or if she possessed latent skills and strength. What if this girl truly had such attributes? The best solution was to transform Riley into a supreme mage. Riley took the book back to her dormitory, and grimoire escaped in human form. Riley told him about her past. When she was old enough to discern right from wrong, Riley had become a member of a gang. Her nickname in the group was Tool Number 2. To them, Riley was just a means to make money. To survive, she had to follow orders. At one point, the gang's attitude towards Riley changed. To set an example, Riley killed a few members to ensure they would never dare cross her again. However, they learned nothing from it. After eliminating them, Riley escaped from the gang. By chance, Riley met a mage on the street who recognized her talent and enrolled her in the academy. During her studies, Riley faced school violence because she was a special student. She was beaten and bullied but never fought back. For some reason, grimoire offered her two choices. One was to accept such a life while learning magic from grimoire. The other was to leave the academy. It was a difficult decision. A wrong choice could ruin her future. An oppressive life with a certain future at the academy or a free life with an uncertain future outside. Riley chose the latter. Riley went to the Renelmus Academy to undergo the process of dropping out. She had to give up many privileges associated with being a student, such as special items obtainable through competitions or potions gifted to top students. Riley and grimoire exited the academy through an emergency exit that Riley found. However, the exit had two paths. The left path contained about 3 traps, while the right path was a dead end. Riley's spell, typically used for navigation and commonly known as a pathfinding spell, was too basic and ineffective. Grimoire advised her not to be limited by conventional thinking and to try a different approach. Instead of releasing a large amount of mana in one direction, she should disperse mana in multiple directions. She focused intently on each particle of mana, releasing and visualizing them one by one. This new method helped Riley find a way out. The reason Riley risked so much to find Grimoire and even dropped out of the academy was her deep desire to transform into a powerful mage under Grimoire's guidance. On the highest corridor rooftop, towering even above the main central stained glass window, a large fire blazed with rolling flames. Occasionally, the wind swept away a swath of fire along with the smoke. The screams, the shattering of glass, and the sound of the building collapsing composed a symphony of death. Amid the bright red flames, two children dashed out swiftly, each trying to seize their own thread of fate. However, only one of them managed to escape. For Riley, this moment continued to haunt her memory. She wanted to become stronger than anyone else to avenge her unfortunate past. In life, nothing is given for free. Grimoire taught her magic for his own purposes. Riley received a letter of introduction from Professor Errance of the Magic Tower. The Magic Tower is a place where wizards can build relationships, and the position of a Grand Wizard is not something that can be achieved solely through skill. There is no better place than a magic tower to lay a political foundation. The Errance Magic Tower is one of the 5 Grand Royal Magic Towers. Ian Errance, the founder and owner, was over 300 years old. Although he only reached the level of a high mage, Ian Errance had accomplishments far surpassing other supreme mages. The book about Errance stated that the mortal man who dreamed of immortality continued to live without being able to become a lifelong aspiration of the great supreme mage Ian Errance. Grimoire suddenly realized that Ian Errance, to reach the realm of immortality, was a mage who had elevated the royal family's status and had fulfilled the last wishes of his teacher, Marta Farharic, over the centuries. Grimoire and Riley had come to the royal capital, where they both walked around, buying local specialties. At the city center, a statue of the 5 great mages appeared before them. These were extremely talented geniuses passionate about magic. They were not fools, they were people who never gave up. Grimoire explained why he taught Riley magic, to nurture contractual mages and to avenge those who had turned him into pages of a book. For this purpose, Grimoire's disciples had endured much hardship. Marta had also tried a resurrection ceremony for Grimoire, but it was unsuccessful. That day, Riley and Grimoire promised each other to help avenge their grievances. The past is something people cannot simply erase from their lives. About 5 years after Grimoire was reincarnated as a grimoire, it was stolen from a shabby store by a boy named Faendal, who lived day by day wandering in the slums. He was Grimoire's first contractor, and he was the one who named the book. Grimoire wanted to repay Faendal by teaching him to become a supreme mage. Faendal was born weak, and Grimoire's haste in teaching him magic was a mistake. As Faendal delved deeper into the power, his discomfort increased. At this point, Grimoire could not contain his dissatisfaction. But by the time he realized it, it was too late. Faendal had coughed up blood and died. Yesterday is the past, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. Since the bond was established, Riley and Grimoire had come to understand each other to a certain extent. Adding a bit of voice through mana would turn it into a full sensory exchange between the two. It was a convenient technique in many ways. Grimoire found Riley somewhat adorable when she whispered in front of others. Thanks to the bond, anyone could guess the true emotions of the other. The Errance Magic Tower, being one of the 5 great towers, required a selection test. They wanted fully accomplished mages. The selection test had a strict regime for talent utilization. For Riley to be chosen into the Errance Magic Tower, she had to stand out and demonstrate her strength among countless other mages. Of course, there were ordinary mages who had spent their lives preparing for this test. That is why it was called the Graveyard of Geniuses. Grimoire could help Riley reach an intermediate or higher mage level in just 6 months. Grimoire took Riley to the training grounds, where a former disciple had once lived. He was no longer alive, but not quite dead either. One of Grimoire's disciples had turned into a lick. Only a grand mage could become a lick. The first test Grimoire set for Riley was to find out where the lick's hideout was hidden somewhere in the forest. Riley used magic to navigate, but there were too many disruptive spells such as barriers, illusions, magical transformations, and hundreds of other complex magical formulas obstructing her senses. At the highest branch of a tree, the lick was observing her, silently thinking that Riley seemed quite self-assured. Even a senior mage would take a year to find the lick's hideout. It's no wonder Riley was somewhat self-assured, given her prodigious relationship with Mana. Riley quickly discovered the lick's hideout, causing the lick's face to pale with fear as she found him. The previous record was 4 years, but Riley overcame the obstacle in less than 10 minutes, tracking back a type of spell that disrupts one's path, a method effective only for those with a high affinity for mana. Riley was a monster. The Lick's hideout was shrouded in mystical black smoke, filled with bizarre pets. As a creature that defied the laws of the celestial realms and cursed by the gods, a soul summoner, the Lick certainly could not carry the aura of dark magic with him. A creature against death. The foundation of the Lick was dark magic, which was strictly forbidden in the Empire. Devotees of evil deities, necromancers, dark wizards, even including thieves' guilds that provided illegal materials for these practitioners. There was a specific organization set up to punish them, known as the Investigation Agency. Anything associated with demons was a target for punishment. This is why Grimoire taught new death mages instead of keeping a Lick by his side. About 5 years ago, the Lick had to deal with adventurers who mistook his place for a dungeon due to the aura of dark magic. They attacked upon seeing the Lick, forcing him to defend himself and turn them into slaves. It turned out these were no ordinary adventurers. They were Death Knights and the captain of the investigation agency who had been missing for 5 years. Usually, the mind of a Lick is somewhat affected by dark magic. Grimoire often visited him to check his mental state and make adjustments. It seems that during the 300 years Grimoire was absent, the reins had become loose. There was a fraudster impersonating as a disciple of Marta Fahelic, and Grimoire was planning to enter the magic tower to avenge the fraudster. Half a year before the selection test was a very short time for an apprentice to catch up with a senior mage, even for a prodigy like Riley. But with 4 times that span, if she had 2 years, it could actually be feasible. Lick and Grimoire had spent a long time creating a place with a strange magical flow. Riley had 2 distinct advantages over other mages. Firstly, Riley possesses extraordinary physical abilities due to her background involving the Thieves' Guild. And secondly, she has a naturally superior mana affinity. From now on, Riley needs to focus on these 2 strengths and master a crucial magic known as Dispel. Dispel is a counter spell used to nullify other spells. It means it can cause a fireball flying towards her to disappear into thin air. Grimoire wants Riley to use Dispel to prevent opponents from casting spells during the selection test, and then use her extraordinary physical abilities to fight hand-to-hand. No matter how much more magical power her opponents might possess, as long as she ensures they cannot use their magic, she will prevail. This is the only way to cope with the mages during the selection test. This time, the task of teaching Riley has been assigned to the Lick. When emotions are suppressed, they can act like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any moment. Usually, Riley's skills would develop when attacked, as she does not want to be hit. However, instead of retaliating, Riley fled for an hour. It has been 3 days since Grimoire met Riley. Although not a long time, it was enough to recognize her personality. Riley possesses a high self-esteem. She detests failure and dislikes showing her weaknesses. For members in the text, failure is not an option. Grimoire wondered if past psychological pressures still affected her. Because Riley feared failure, she might have thought that running away was her only option. Riley only ran because she feared the pain of magic attacks. What Riley didn't know was not the principles, but the methods to detect an opponent's spell, delve into the root of the spell, and deeper into the art of magic. Riley was unaware of the specific steps to dispel a spell. The only things Grimoire taught Riley were the guiding arts and empathic connection. As Grimoire advised, Riley would try to forge her own path. A stream of energy resembling a mana labyrinth, filled with blue hues. Grimoire and Riley had navigated the labyrinth twice, the underground corridors of Artemis, and the path to the Lick's hideout. Now Riley had to decode these magics one by one, sneaking to prevent others from noticing, as when using empathic connection for secret conversations. Riley spent 4 hours to succeed. She struggled with that low-level magical sphere for 16 hours, collapsing in surprise at how quickly time had passed. But Riley thought she had grasped a part of it. Time relentlessly marches on, with each season changing. In September, as autumn cools and the sun sets earlier, it's a period that the magical world pays the most attention to. The season of the selection tests of the 5 magical towers had arrived. Riley perfectly performed the spell dispelling technique without a single flaw. 6 months of practice with Grimoire and Lick, feeling like 2 years, had come to an end. It was time for the 3 to reap the fruits of their labor. With her level, Riley could handle an intermediate mage without any problems. Grimoire thought just a bit more polishing of Riley's attack magic would make everything perfect. Suddenly, Lick dropped a piece of paper, which contained his plan to dominate the world. The first step was to create a Death Knight, and the second step was to synthesize chimeras capable of using magic. Grimoire vehemently objected. Lick explained that he only intended to take a small city in the east to establish his own kingdom. During the time Lick's world domination plan was exposed, in the northern region of the kingdom, a few others were also contemplating a conspiracy. In the north of the empire, on the way to the city of the mages, Wilhelm, there was a forest blanketed in sheer white snow, where a young-looking girl was walking in the opposite direction. She was not alone in the forest. Hidden in the bushes, a group of people in black hoods was following her. They commented on her pathetic walking style and her lack of any signs of alertness. Moreover, she was dressed in expensive clothing. Then, an archer shot an arrow at the girl. She fell onto the snowy ground, adding a splash of her red blood. The group rummaged through all the valuable items on her body, unaware that she had been standing behind them all along. So, whose body was on the snow? The group turned pale with fear. When they looked again, the body and the treasure had disappeared. It turns out she was a mage. With a mere wave of her hand, the robbers were all dead. The end did not resemble a battle, but rather a one-sided massacre. Riley's group, along with many others, traveled by horse-drawn carriage through the snowy forest to participate in the selection rounds of the 5 great towers. The selection exams attracted all kinds of mages, including crazed individuals who saw the exams as a legitimate opportunity to kill. In the carriage, an old man advised Riley to give up the tower's selection exam and continue her training at a school in Wilhelm. However, Riley was determined. Wilhelm, a cold city where snow falls year-round, was the center of magical engineering, with aircraft flying everywhere and streets lined with lamp posts. Grimoire felt that although the surroundings had changed, the atmosphere remained the same. The location of the organizing office for the selection was not on the map. Riley used a locating spell, identifying 10 locations purported to be the organizing office. All were relatively clean buildings with limited public access. The problem was that these could be branches of academies or intermediate research laboratories. As they were struggling to find their way, suddenly, a figure appeared in front of them. He wore a bulky robe, typical of those active in Wilhelm, surrounded by a faint display of roaming magical energy. He was a novice mage. The locating spell was useless here as residual magical energy from experiments and research interfered with the spell's accuracy. Enthusiastic to assist, Riley asked for his help to find the office managing the entrance examination. Along the way, he cast a spell on Riley. Since meeting him, Riley had noticed that he emphasized certain words in an unusual way. He used a special intonation to imbue his words with magic, often called a spell, which is the first step in casting a magic spell. The man used this special intonation to conceal the spell and cast it on Riley. The spell he cast was related to paralysis. Had it been successful, Riley would have been completely paralyzed and then sold either as a subject for dark magical experiments or to an illegal slave trader. This issue was quite common in Wilhelm, with victims often being young people like Riley. Riley's ordinary words were enough to provoke and anger him. He awakened his fire attribute, and although it was only low-level magic, he controlled it quite well, which was suitable for practical experience. He threw a spear at Riley, but with just one look, the spear disintegrated, and the magic was dispelled. Through training with a zombie, Riley's dynamic vision had surpassed that of humans. When someone like Riley leads with magic and her mind, it's like night and day compared to him. Riley's attack was different from his. There were no twists, no applications, no tricks, just a block of simple magic. Yet, it was so fast it was unimaginable a true magic missile. To show gratitude for his death, Riley shared a tip. Mastering magic does not solve every problem, especially in combat, and the outcome can vary greatly depending on the individual's characteristics and talents. Grimoire pleaded in desperation, but the man was not resurrected. Grimoire and Riley came here to gain more combat experience, and ending like this was not right. Among all the locations, the 10th building finally turned out to be the management office. Initially, Riley had checked the 10 locations said to be the management office using magic to trace the path. Strangely, no one knew where the management office was, and only after checking all the buildings once was it found, clearly, with such signage. But Riley did not notice anything amiss. It was not on the map nor detectable by the magic used to determine the path, as if they were intentionally hiding the location. Grimoire suddenly realized that when he marked the locations of all 10 buildings they had visited, they formed an inverted star. This was a magical circle, and the office managers had used the entire city of Wilhelm as such a circle. They had placed special buildings at each point and activated the magical circle. Hidden, with magical barriers, invisibility, and illusions, these spells were designed to confuse and complicate matters for visitors as much as possible. When the gate opened, a woman with red hair spoke up to congratulate Riley for passing the first stage of the selection exam. A blue seal appeared on Riley's hand, proving she was a candidate for the selection exam. With this item, she would have access to Wilhelm's facilities for free, and the next phase of the exam would take place in a week. Riley thought the first round seemed too easy, but that was something only Riley, skilled in pathfinding magic, could say. Those places were not on the map and were very hard to find even with pathfinding magic. There were 10 locations said to be administrative offices, all part of an exam. The exam management office would only appear after you had found all 9 spots. The manager had mentioned something like that. They had to overcome many obstacles, find all 9 locations, and then find the final management office. Searching for this management office must have been a nightmare for other wizards, but not for Riley. She was advised to avoid any conflicts and other contestants as much as possible before the next exam. Sometimes, a few fools around here would choose to fight blindly to assess the abilities of other contestants before the exam. Some might ignore the warnings and still try to fight with Riley. At this moment, a sharp stream of air directed at Riley was the same energy she had sensed from the corpses they had seen on their carriage ride. The person currently emitting murderous intent was the perpetrator of those deaths. Following this murderous intent was another application of pathfinding magic, ignoring physical appearances and viewing the world only through energy sources. Riley had spotted her, thinking she could win. Grimoire advised her to adopt as strong a defensive position as possible. Suddenly, a burst of red energy rushed towards Riley, too fast for her to react. Riley hesitated between dispelling the magic or ducking to avoid it. Before she could counterattack or dodge, it pierced through her brain. In that moment, Riley boosted her strength, thinking she had to sacrifice a bit to protect herself. She would create a shield in the direction of the incoming attack. It would quickly be shattered, but it would create a gap for her to dodge the strike. Simultaneously, Riley prepared a magic bullet, as her opponent might think she was just casting a defensive spell. However, it could not be broken because the attacker's power was too strong. It turned out to be just a battle occurring in her mind. A mental battle, a simulation that appeared in a state of high concentration, where one would identify the opponent, feel the murderous intent, and think about how to react was all just an illusion. The gruesome scene could only be described as the work of a deranged killer. She seemed like a ruthless psychopath that Riley needed to be wary of. Among those who used magic, no normal person would use it as a murder weapon. She led Riley to eat expensive dishes, a far cry from the dreadful meals in the damp cave of the undead. Lick had made a considerable effort, trying to cook for Riley with all his might. Moreover, he had balanced all the nutrients and might have used rare ingredients like magical herbs generously. Her name was Rebecca Duncan, the only problem lying in this murderous madwoman. The sorceress's name is Rebecca Duncan, often called Becky. At the young age of 27, she has nearly reached the level of an intermediate mage and has come to Wilhelm to participate in the selection exams. It turns out that Rebecca didn't invite Riley to eat. Rather, everything here is free. Some establishments can be used free of charge by showing them the blue symbol on one's hand, and this restaurant is one of those. When Riley showed that blank expression, it meant she was quite uncomfortable. After leaving the restaurant, Riley and Grimoire were looking for a place to rest. Although the facilities were inspected by the 5 great magical towers, there was still a significant variance in quality. The Sky Whale Inn was the best place to rest as it was soundproof, quiet, had a kind host, and the food was excellent. Rebecca provided a list of places to visit, but the two did not travel together. Based on Grimoire's 1,000-year experience, it believed it was sincere if Riley agreed. Rebecca would have taken Riley with her already. However, if one were to guess, Rebecca might be intrigued because Riley, still at a beginner level, had surpassed the initial phase of the exams. Perhaps she was curious about the type of talent that had helped Riley succeed. There's a saying that like recognizes like. It's unimaginable that someone as cheerful as that could be an extremist, who had the idea of killing from the first meeting, and was a madman who had slaughtered those robbers. The less one knows about an opponent, the more dangerous they become. Both bid farewell, and Riley hoped that upon their next meeting, they could face each other directly without using tricks like illusion magic to scare Riley. The illusory battle that occurred during their first encounter with Becky had Riley facing death in that battle and returning to the real world. Becky said that the phenomenon was a mental battle. Although a mental battle is a real concept, in reality, it was illusion magic that Becky had used. Becky was surprised as only a high-level sorcerer would have detected that. From ancient times, the only way to detect illusion magic was certainty. Riley could not be killed by the hands of an incompetent sorcerer like Becky. If it were a battle in Riley's mental space, she would surely have won without difficulty. But seeing something impossible happen, it was certainly just illusion magic. All sorcerers have a strong sense of self-pride, and no sorcerer would remain silent when called incompetent, especially if such remarks come from a lower-ranked sorcerer. The amount of magical power one can handle at once, the precision of their control, the strength of their focal energy, and even the speed of spellcasting each time they level up. Now, that person was lying in an alley in Wilhelm, and such a vast distance could not be easily bridged regardless of skill. The difference in levels is absolute, a fact established in the world of magic. However, Riley knew how to fight and win against stronger opponents and had done so many times, like the fight with the undead, the dragon she handled at the shelter, or the battle with the person Grimoire met today. Riley discovered that person lying in an alley in Wilhelm with a hole in his chest, an unusual energy flow that could not exist in ordinary living bodies, and if it weren't for someone sensitive to energy like Riley, Grimoire would not have detected it. At the Administrative Management Office, the officials manage the candidates. This year, there are more interesting candidates than usual, especially Riley, from Renelmus Academy. They thought Riley was arrogant, barely passing the first test, and must have been wandering around Wilhelm for nearly 3 months. But no, Riley arrived in Wilhelm this afternoon, and the fastest record is 4 hours. Even though Becky used 20 clones to wreak havoc in Wilhelm, the average time for an ordinary person to pass the first test and find the management office is about a week. Even Garen Edward of the Theobald, a high-ranking expert, took all day to find the management office. This means Riley is currently in the lead. With 1 more week to the second selection exam, Riley starts a more leisurely lifestyle than anyone else, waking up when the sun is high and having breakfast, taking a nap and having lunch, and dining in a relaxed state, and 3 days later, she starts getting tired of resting. Riley and Grimoire go out to the Central Library of Arcadia, a building that has been around for hundreds of years. This might be the second largest library after Ludimus, and it also holds the most magical books. Contestants can use the library without any special procedures. Certainly, exploring Arcadia would be a valuable experience. There are many great books and rare magical tomes there, but Grimoire had been trapped in that cursed place for 300 years, surrounded by those detestable books that could not be avoided. Unlike the 21st century, which is filled with technology and information, in this world, one must rely on books to gain knowledge. The interior space is magnificent and majestic, not feeling cramped with tightly packed rows of books like in Renelmus. Riley's access card is of the highest platinum level, allowing her to go anywhere. Thus, the only destination left is the forbidden area with the banned books. The 2 books Riley chose from the regular area are fine, but the real deal is the banned books which discuss the 100 great figures who shaped the modern era of empires and insights into the Second Awakening and Attribute Explosion. That area seems a bit brighter, and Riley recognizes the old man from the carriage there. He is quite impressed that Riley passed the first test despite that terrible magic. He advises that even though Riley received the token from the first round, it isn't much better than before and suggests she give up. The exams will be far more brutal than Riley imagines. Once the smell of blood spreads here, it will turn into a slaughterhouse. A sorcerer with decades of practical combat experience might manage, but for a talented but inexperienced sorcerer like Riley, it would be a very dangerous test. So, he suggests she give up and wait for the next opportunity. The old man thinks Riley is foolish, full of impulsive youthful enthusiasm, but Riley is firm in her decision. Then, the old man shows her that by dueling with her. To test Riley, she must duel with the old man. However, it won't be a normal duel. He won't attack, giving Riley 3 opportunities to strike him. If he moves or shifts during these attempts, he will consider it a loss and will no longer intervene in Riley's affairs. If Riley succeeds in striking him, it's guaranteed she will pass the test. Across the continent, there were once 50 people who reached the level of high-ranking expert sorcerer, and he was one of them. Among those participating in the test, he is the strongest. If Riley can strike the old man, it would be a way to prove her abilities. He threatens Riley by suggesting breaking her legs so she cannot participate in the test. Riley, her pride deeply wounded, insists on dueling him without any restrictions. The old man notices in Riley's possession a book about the 100 great figures who shaped the modern empire. He flips to a page and shows it to Riley. It reads, 67. Garen Edward von Theobald, formerly the commander of the Magical Corps on the Western Front, known for single-handedly holding back hundreds of demons. This event is also known as the Battle of Hasselpart, and the Emperor lauded Eward von Theobald's heroics, naming him in the Hall of Fame. Not all high-level sorcerers have the same skills. Some sorcerers lock themselves in a room to practice, while others enhance their rank by struggling through bloody battles. Among these high-level sorcerers, some are called true giants like Garen Theobald. Standing before Riley and Grimoire is he. The old man expands the space to make it easier to duel. Grimoire watches how effective Riley's attacks are against a high-level expert, presenting a great opportunity to test her. Sorcerers who reach the lower levels before the age of 20 are often called geniuses. All such sorcerers have experienced 2 awakenings in their lives. The first awakening occurs at the age of 10, where they instinctively understand the nature of magic, mana, and the arena. They are called disciples and are trained in basic magical practices like sorcerers. The second awakening happens as they mature. The dormant attribute seeds within their mana core sprout, granting them unique attributes. This allows them to use more complex, diverse, and powerful magic. As they become accustomed to their attributes permeating their mana, sorcerers surpass the disciple level and enter the lower levels. This is why the skills of mature sorcerers increase exponentially. Naturally, sorcerers become stronger with age. Conversely, those who surpass the disciple level before reaching adulthood, prior to their second awakening, are considered monstrous. But this is also why Riley was not allowed to participate in the selection test. Otherwise, the magical world would lose a promising talent. It's a cruel method, but it was the only way to save Riley. The duel begins, and Riley launches a magic missile. This isn't a large attack loaded with mana, or a technically complex one that involves trajectory manipulation. The old man counters with a mana shield, an honest attack so straightforward that it doesn't even require the use of attributes. This isn't just magic. It's the kind of dread that feels like sitting at death's doorstep. Ultimately, what Riley did next was crucial. He had crossed the boundary between life and death on the battlefield hundreds of times. He felt the tension similar to being there just because of a low-level girl. It was unclear what the problem was, but his energy was fading. This was a dispel. Riley deliberately launched a direct attack to catch him off guard. It seemed that Riley's confidence was not just from the impulsiveness of youth. He needed to keep an eye on her. Riley had precisely targeted his weakest point in magic, a feat a low-level sorcerer could not recognize. Moreover, despite its subtlety, Riley managed to push him back. A special keenness about energy helped her detect flaws in the magic and the technical knowledge to immediately exploit that weakness. It was as if a great sorcerer stood behind Riley. This was not the skill of an inexperienced young girl, someone who could easily overcome the rank disparity. A genius. He had no choice but to acknowledge that because Riley would pass the selection test, even with only using 2 attacks to push him back. Riley continued with her third attack. Riley still had a few things about him she wanted to confirm. The first attack was deliberately to make him lose vigilance, and the second attack demonstrated superior skill compared to a young sorcerer. Was Riley using the match as a test against a high-level sorcerer like him? As Grimoire had expected, true high-level sorcerers were indeed in a different class. It was an unconventional attack. It was the only magic attack Riley could use, a person who had not yet undergone a second attribute awakening, the missile. In non-standard attribute magic, the only thing Riley could do was add variations through technique. The way Riley used the dispel to create a space and then launch a surprise attack was something even a high-level sorcerer would struggle with. After the match ended, he asked Riley if she could keep the match a secret. During their conversation, Riley and Grimoire realized that the Sky Whale Inn introduced by Becky was not a good lodging. Anyway, a psychopathic killer would not make a good friend. He introduced Riley to a much better inn, the Arpel Stringwood Grand Hotel. Riley needed to find Becky to give her a lesson, an opportunity that could be realized in the selection test tomorrow. Some people view the selection test as a legal killing field. Rebecca Duncan is exactly that type of sorcerer. She had left a significant impression on those involved. Last year, she was disqualified for killing too many, and the year before that, she had killed a test manager. Most of the time she had to restrain her madness, but once a year, she unleashed her other side through the selection test. It was no coincidence that she was known as a crazed killer. So, why did the 5 Towers of Magic let Becky go unchecked? If she was that dangerous, they should have blocked her at the registration stage. The 5 Towers of Magic had a simple motive. They wanted to use Rebecca Duncan as a testing mechanism. They aimed to intimidate the candidates by having a notorious killer among them, making them too scared to continue, which was also considered a challenge. The old man accompanied Riley to the site designated by the magic circle. It seemed like this was the second testing site, outwardly resembling the selection test management office. Opening the door unleashed a strong burst of light, a phenomenon that Grimoire had experienced thousands of times, known as teleportation. Inside, it was indeed opulent beyond imagination, resembling the interior of a royal palace. Indeed, it was a royal palace, but quite ancient. It was a relic, a place where artifacts, treasures, and magical essences lay dormant. Usually, such artifacts were protected by traps and guardians. They were classified as some of the most difficult dungeons to conquer. Choosing such a dangerous location for the testing site was as expected. This was indeed a selection test. Riley encountered Becky, lied that she had never stayed at the lodging Becky recommended to make Becky angry. Both promised to duel each other. Looking up at the high platform, the exam managers were there, ready to guide the candidates through the second test. The second test was a team competition. A total of 42 candidates would form teams of 3 and compete against other teams, with team members assigned by the managers, requiring immediate cooperation to pass the checkpoints. Riley was teamed up with Becky and a redhead girl. They had 30 minutes to get acquainted with their team members. The redhead girl was quite shy. The team competition was a method to evaluate mutual cooperation. Therefore, if even one team member died, the entire team would be disqualified. Every candidate was dissatisfied with the rules, feeling they were excessive. A high-level sorcerer speaking up could quiet dozens of people easily. Everyone might have been treated well just for being sorcerers until now. After all, sorcerers are invaluable beings. No one dared speak up, no matter how much trouble they caused. The result of such conditions lasting for decades is that people's characters naturally become distorted. The personalities of sorcerers are broken, and their social skills deteriorate. But that would no longer be allowed. To enter the magic tower, candidates had to act not as individuals, but as members of a team. That's why the second test was a team competition, to see how people cooperate with those they meet for the first time. If no one was willing to endure, they should just give up on the test right there. Hearing this, Becky and Riley now had no choice but to cooperate to their fullest. Grimoire thought back. Becky had been reluctantly disqualified even the first time she met Riley. So perhaps Becky was not just a homicidal maniac. It might also be an act. The third member was indeed a quite shy girl, named Olivia from Blaze Arcane Magic Academy. Becky thought of her as a fool who only knew ancient magic. Starting with the name Ancient Magic, it was a system of magic used in the past and hardly used anymore. To put it nicely, it's traditional. To put it bluntly, it's outdated. Those who study ancient magic are fools chasing romanticized concepts. Fairy tales, for example, erasing a mountain with magic or splitting the sea. Those immersed in such absurdities are called fools chasing myths and treated as such. But how do they still exist? In the team, one was Becky, an illusion assassin with anger control issues, one a fanatic of ancient magic who was not good at communication, and Riley, truly a formidable lineup. The old man asked Riley, as some people feel nauseous the first time they teleport. He was quite satisfied, thanks to the first test. Everyone here was a top-class sorcerer. The concern was that no one knew what Becky would do once the test began. She could betray, erupt in sudden anger, or possibly do even worse. Grimoire and Riley always had to be on guard. As for Olivia, it was hard to expect much from ancient magic that lacked practical value. And worse, she had no real-world experience. In the end, the only ones who were reliable were Riley and Becky. While other groups fought with a full team of 3, Riley's team effectively had only 2. Riley had to endure, be patient, and determined. They were not the only ones discontented, as others felt similarly disillusioned. Grimoire advised Riley to overcome those thoughts, to find the strengths of the team members and cooperate as a single unit, as a team. That was the essence of the second test. Of course, Grimoire was not worried about this because half a year of training in a zombie lair was very meaningful. Grimoire was confident that Riley would pass this selection test, and they would achieve the desired results. Of that they were certain. The 30 minutes of getting acquainted had passed. Across was the entrance to the ruins where the second test would take place. Now, the instructor would explain the rules of the test. Inside the ruins lies a labyrinth. Everyone must search for the treasures hidden throughout this maze. The guide retrieves a sphere, from which an illusion of the treasure's shape emerges. It appears to be a golem. The time allotted for the examination is 24 hours, and there are 2 conditions to pass the test. First, one must possess the golden earth core when the test concludes. Second, all team members must remain alive until that time. In summary, the task is to find the golden golem, retain the golden earth core, return with all team members intact, and survive for 24 hours. This is the treasure hunt within the ruins. As long as everyone is wary of the traps and the hidden guardians, it seems not overly dangerous. There are only 3 golden cores, with a total of 42 contestants making up 14 teams. This means that only 3 teams can pass the test. The second type of examination, which only has a pass rate of 20%, offers no guarantee that all 3 golden cores will be found. Resources are limited due to excessive demand. They want to see a fierce and ruthless competition. The 5 great magic towers encourage competition among the magicians, ostensibly as a talent mode, but practically setting them against each other. The most dangerous among these is the Chimera, a high-risk creature specially prepared by the organizers for this test, designed solely for destruction and carnage. Some of the contestants might already be familiar with this creature. An event occurred 5 years ago during which a zombie invasion took place in the Eastern Empire, and it was these chimeras that attacked the civilians at that time. Grimoire fought this same chimera 300 years ago. Upon passing through this gate, the candidates will be teleported to a random location along with their team. It will not be easy, but if the candidates overcome the test, they will ultimately enjoy the glory of the 5 great magic towers. The second test officially starts now. Somehow, Grimoire has become a mastermind. Grimoire is the master of the undead who invaded the Empire. More importantly, the entrance to the labyrinth is very wide, making them feel like dwarves entering the palaces of giants. Suddenly, the ground shakes, emitting booming sounds. It turns out to be a statue, appearing as one of the obstacles. It was not something that Riley's team had to fight against. In the restricted area, the task is to find a golden core while avoiding a monster. The statue looks like a dangerous zone. Grimoire's instincts, honed over thousands of years, scream not to touch that statue. At least 3 or 4 Theobalds would be needed to even attempt it. Becky wants to fight the statue, but Riley stops her because they do not yet know the strength of the monster. If they act recklessly, they will all die even if by a miracle they manage to defeat it, and they would gain nothing from it. Becky responds that the thrill of a fierce battle against a strong enemy, striking its weak point with a critical blow, and ultimately achieving a hard-won victory, is an experience every mage should have. No sane mage would provoke such a monster unless they are a battle fanatic like Becky. There are others like Becky, fighting the giant statue, wanting to turn that stone into dust. But upon touching the statue, it doesn't even flinch after a critical hit. Just one kick from it completely destroys another team. Riley places his hand on the ground, but it is hard to spread his internal energy. The ruins are among the most dangerous purgatories, meaning naturally high difficulty. But no matter how you look at it, this is too much. There are all sorts of energies interfering and hindering perception. Even ancient spells forgotten in modern times are layered here, and each layer is hard to break through. Normally, finding anything here would be nearly impossible, but Riley only needs 5 minutes, or possibly 3 if quick. The restriction on energy dispersion for some mages is like being blindfolded with sickness. It's frustrating, but Riley, as usual, is unlike anyone else. Olivia cannot use basic pathfinding spells and lacks combat experience. However, Olivia suggests using duplicates of Becky as she did in the first test. Becky could spread the duplicates everywhere. If the entire team uses duplicates, there would be no need for pathfinding spells. It's a sensible idea. If the team explores the ruins with many duplicates, finding the golden core is just a matter of time. It allows for extensive exploration in a space where pathfinding is restricted. But that's just in theory. Assuming Becky sends duplicates throughout the ruins as Olivia suggested, the team would gather a lot of information because they share Becky's vision and senses. It would be like having Becky's own crystal surveillance devices spread throughout the ruins. However, this only holds true if Becky's duplicates remain intact. Becky cannot avoid the dungeon traps while managing dozens of duplicates and cannot handle all the monsters on her own. Managing the duplicates consumes a tremendous amount of energy. Imagine if all duplicates die and Becky's internal energy is depleted. The whole team would be in trouble in that situation. When a duplicate is destroyed, a significant amount of internal energy is lost. Riley has completed the pathfinding spell. Half a year of relentless training truly paid off for Riley. Grimoire suggests that Riley name it. She has named all the techniques in the Thieves' Guild. Its name is Riley's Advanced Supreme Ultimate Pathfinding. Along the way, Riley detects an archery trap. There are as many as 30 traps, high potential for energy linkage and pathfinding skills, combined harmoniously with experience from the Thieves' Guild. Other mages deploy defensive spells whenever they pass by, or surround themselves with a continuous layer of energy shields. However, this will deplete their internal energy, and if they encounter a monster in that situation, they will surely meet a grim fate. Around the path lie many corpses. From the looks of the injuries, it seems they were attacked by creatures known as hounds. It appears they had depleted their internal energy passing through an area full of traps like Riley's group. They didn't even put up a proper fight. Thanks to Riley, the whole team got past the trap area without wasting internal energy. Becky thanks Riley and acknowledges her skills. In that moment, Riley spoke out everything. When Becky first intended to kill when they first met, promised food but led to a free restaurant and suggested a place like the Whale Inn when Riley asked about a good inn. While the two argued, Olivia felt pity for the corpses. The corpses, not yet dry from the hound's saliva, which is object saliva, have an excellent sense of smell like wild dogs. They track their trail extremely well. The team did not target the statue, but rather the other teams. Against the team's expectations, a stream of blue slime unexpectedly attacked the other teams. Despite being merely a test, it was exceedingly brutal to the extent of being nauseating. It turned out to be an invisible chimera. No one intervened as the monster continued to consume its own body, gradually becoming visible. Understanding the nature of the chimera, Riley persuaded Becky to stop hiding and confront it. Becky expressed a desire for a fight that brought a bit of excitement, seeing it as the perfect opportunity. As something approached, the chimera attempted to attack Riley but was repelled by her magic. The chimera's attack was thwarted by a single dispel, causing it to collapse. Grimoire remarked that Riley should not disturb a dog while it's eating. Becky was quite impressed with Riley's decisiveness in her movements, remarking it impressive for a child. However, the chimera was still alive, and Riley hit it with another dispel. When it was Becky's turn, she did not attack immediately but commented on whether its eyes were functioning properly, noting its extreme ugliness and torn body. Wanting to end it quickly, both joined forces, and a magical missile was easily launched to defeat the chimera. Only Olivia was left trembling, curled up tightly like a rolled mat, sensing danger. Grimoire appreciated how well Becky looked after Olivia. Despite her irresponsible words, Becky was actually very attentive and caring towards Olivia, showing her care in her own way. Becky was not the murderous maniac Grimoire had thought. Although still an eccentric sorceress, Becky was aggressive and sometimes acted crazily without hesitation, reminiscent of Riley's behavior. Nevertheless, Grimoire concluded that Becky was not a killer for amusement. Later, Grimoire pondered what Garen Theobald's warning from the previous night meant. Becky was a madwoman always expressing her impulses through the selection test. It bothered Grimoire, but it meant the three of them would stick together throughout the second test, naturally uncovering the truth behind the rumors. Olivia implored the Great Mother of Magic to watch over the souls of the deceased and asked the Goddess of Duty to gather their spirits, which was quite a complicated ritual to commemorate the dead. In ancient magic, there was the concept of a Great Mother guiding the souls of deceased sorcerers to the afterlife. Thus, to make the path easier, it was advisable not to leave any grudges from the deceased behind. In summary, that was the rule of the secretive arcane school. Olivia mentioned that there was no pathfinding magic in ancient magic, questioning how she managed to pass the first test without it. She said it was impossible to use pathfinding magic, so how she found the administration office and passed the first test was a mystery. In fact, all Olivia could do was to demonstrate her modest knowledge of ancient magic. There were no rules that one had to find the administration office on their own. Thus, Olivia had asked a sorcerer from a guild specializing in finding to locate the office for her. Olivia exaggerated her capabilities, claiming to be a genius. She knew more about ancient magic than anyone else in her school, so Olivia believed she deserved to be recognized by the 5 great magic towers. In Olivia's mind, the 5 great magic towers should worship her, as no one in the world was like her. However, Olivia couldn't find the administration office herself, and when she asked others, they said they did not know. But Olivia felt it was unfair for a genius like her to fail the selection test just because she couldn't use the pathfinding feature. Desperate, Olivia asked a sorcerer who had just completed the first test for help. Grimoire thought that relying on others' power in a test to prove one's own capabilities was completely against common sense. Olivia still felt she was right. She asked others politely, but they treated her like a lunatic and refused to help, saying a fool like her trying to leverage others' power did not deserve to be in the selection test. Therefore, Olivia reluctantly resorted to torture magic. There were some frightening spells in ancient magic, and what Olivia excelled at most was torture magic. Becky couldn't believe the administrators let that slide. A lunatic like Olivia talking about respecting the dead and all that. Olivia is indeed a real madwoman, and no one in the group is normal. With only 12 hours left until the second test and no golem cores obtained, the condition to pass the second test is to find the core of a golden golem. To achieve this, candidates must capture a golden golem. The problem being that even if a candidate finds one, it flees while avoiding traps. This is why the team hasn't been able to catch a golden golem for half a day. Capturing it is difficult, but there is some good news. 2 nearby golems have completely stopped moving. The old man's team is one step ahead. He is a living legend, Mr. Garen Theobald, who alone held off hundreds of demons in the Haspart Mountains. It's fortunate for their team to have him. The team suggested taking a break, but even if they wanted to rest, there was no time for that. The golem core has a unique magical power, the likes of which the old man has never encountered in his life. It's likely a special core created by the 5 great magic towers for this test. But why spend half a day searching for a core with such powerful magic? Even though the entire ruins are covered by magical interference, it's strange that they couldn't detect such a unique magical force. Even more peculiar, even a team member, Appel Stingwood, a skilled sorcerer who reached intermediate level by age 29 and the second son of the prestigious Stingwood family, followed an elite path from his youth. It's nonsensical that he couldn't detect such a powerful magic force, especially since even Mr. Theobald had difficulty tracking the core's magic. It might just be one of the tricks planned by the 5 great magic towers. When the old man stabbed into the body of the golden golem, its shell cracked, revealing dragon skin inside. Dragon skin has excellent magic-resistant properties, making it undetectable by most magical detection methods. That's why the team had difficulty in searching for a golden golem. Appel couldn't believe that the 5 great magic towers would use such precious material in a selection exam. There are a total of 42 candidates hiding in these ruins. It's unknown how many remain now, but since all passed the first test, they must possess pathfinding skills. Now that the core, hidden beneath a layer of copper skin, has been exposed, it becomes clear that the real test was not merely finding the core of the golden golems, but also about securing or retrieving it, one of the two. The team that first finds the golem has a potential advantage, but once they obtain the core, they become the common enemy of the other teams. This scenario turns into many against one, all part of the grand design of the 5 great magic towers. Faced with multiple enemies, the strategic choices are critical. Will they flee, or will they stand and fight? How will multiple teams react to having a common adversary? Will they unite, or will distractions and competition among themselves cause them to miss their chance? This setup is designed to test their capabilities and strategic thinking. The old man, understanding this, still decided to take the core of the golden golem. Appel suggested that they could discard the shell and extract the core just before the test concludes, but the old man opted against it because he was prepared to face all the challengers at once. Isn't that a better test of their strength and resolve? Ancient magic is the heritage that Grimoire and his disciples have achieved. It's a collection of legends. If these legends really happened, Riley does not understand why everyone has forgotten them. The power of time is indeed terrifying. Magic is deeply intertwined with the flow of history, passing through hundreds of years, and then hundreds more. Over time, the era of war ended, and the Empire, supported by powerful mages, unified the continent. The emperor who united the continent named the nation the Rita's Empire and declared an era of peace across the continent. Simultaneously, the firepower became ineffective. Since war mages were unnecessary in times of peace, the Empire sent mages to research laboratories. It was best to study magical technology to benefit the lives of the Empire's people, and addressing the abandoned dungeons from the war was also crucial. Thus, to conquer them effectively, new magic had to be developed. Magic with strong firepower was optimal for destroying enemies, but using such magic in dungeon settings could cause the ceiling to collapse. burying all mages alive. This is why, for safety and efficiency, magic had to change. Navigation magic was developed to aid in dungeon conquest, while powerful magic, though destructive, was optimized for its high precision and narrow range of destruction. This is how the modern magic system, valuing speed and precision, evolved. On the other hand, magic with destructive firepower lost its usefulness and became ancient magic. It's said to be a tradition, but frankly, it's outdated. With no one seeking it, the lineage was broken, documents were lost, and scholars starved without work. As the empire stabilized, some people began to take an interest in ancient magic, but the gap in history grew larger. Legends became myths, myths became fairy tales, and fairy tales became fantasies. No one remembered the legends actually existed. Mentioning this made Grimoire feel bitter, and he still remembered how to use ancient magic for cruel wars. But it was no longer useful. Riley wanted to learn ancient magic, but was discouraged by Grimoire, because ancient magic had been ineffective since the wars ended. After all, ancient magic is not something that can be utilized just by learning it. To make a spell effective, it is necessary to study ancient rune letters and memorize many different incantations. More importantly, one must transform the magic circuits deeply embedded in one's body. Riley must reset everything built up to now and start over. Naturally, Riley will not be able to use the magic learned so far. Navigation, magic missile, and even dispel. Riley will have to turn her greatest strength, her Manhwa relationship, into nothing. Riley admits defeat. If there is another life, she will learn ancient magic. Another team has successfully captured a golden golem. But given their exhausted appearance, their capture operation must have been very challenging. However, the golden golem is still alive. Why they bother capturing the golem alive? They just need to kill it and take the core out. Grimoire discovers the cracks on the skin of the golden golem are dragon skin. That surely is why the magical power of the core weakened, even though the golden golem was very close. The moment they take out the core, it will reveal its presence. Then many others will feel the magic power, rush here, and a battle will erupt as before. So they captured the golem to take out the core just before the experiment ended. Indeed, the people in the 5 great magic towers are really very cunning. Grimoire reminds Riley to be careful, considering they didn't fall into any traps on the way here. They are highly skilled. In summary, they are strong, so be cautious when fighting them. Becky is very excited to fight these powerful foes. The battle hadn't started when that team surrendered. Grimoire thinks Becky's infamy has become well known in the magical world, so they surrendered as soon as they saw Becky's face. Turns out, it wasn't her they were surrendering to but Olivia. They were willing to give up a golem for fear of her torture magic.